Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a small plastic dial or a digital screen. You touch it, and the temperature in your room changes. If you're cold, you turn it up. If you're hot, you turn it down. We live in a world where the weather is something that happens on the other side of a window pane. But for the vast majority of our time on this planet, the environment wasn't a setting you could adjust, it was a predator. Around 25,000 years ago, the world entered what scientists call the Last Glacial Maximum. This wasn't just a long winter, this was a planet-wide deep freeze. Massive ice sheets, some of them 2 miles thick, crawled down from the poles, swallowing half of North America, all of Scandinavia, and much of Europe. The sea levels dropped by 400 feet because so much of the Earth's water was locked up in ice. The landscape wasn't just cold, it was a desert of frost. If you stood in the middle of what is now France or Germany, you wouldn't see forests, you would see a flat, wind-blasted tundra where the average winter temperature stayed well below 30 degrees under zero for months at a time. Biologically, we were not built for this. We are tropical primates. We have no fur, we have thin skin, and a cooling system designed to dump heat through sweat, not retain it. By all rights, the Ice Age should have been the end of the human story. Yet it was during this exact window of time that humans didn't just survive, they expanded. They didn't just endure the cold, they conquered it. And the way they did it was through a series of technological and social leaps that would eventually lay the foundation for everything we call civilization. To understand how we made it, you have to look at a small, unassuming object found in the Denisova cave in Siberia. It's a needle. It's about 3 inches long, carved from the bone of a large bird, and it has a perfectly drilled eye at the top. It's 50,000 years old. Before this invention, clothing was just a hide draped over the shoulders. It was heavy, it was loose, and it was dangerous. In the deep cold, if your clothing has gaps, you lose heat through convection. If you sweat while moving and that moisture gets trapped against your skin, you die of hypothermia the moment you stop. The needle changed the human relationship with the physical world. It allowed us to create tailored clothing. For the first time, humans could sew multiple layers of fur together, creating the world's first spacesuits. They wore a soft inner layer of fur facing inward to trap a thin layer of warm air against the skin, and a tough, wind-breaking outer layer facing outward. They created parkas, trousers, and waterproof boots. This wasn't just fashion, this was portable habitat. With a needle and thread, a tropical primate could carry a pocket of the Serengeti with them into the Siberian wasteland. But staying warm was only half the battle. You had to eat, and in the Ice Age, the menu was terrifying. Because the cold had killed off most of the edible plants, humans became the ultimate apex predators. They followed the megafauna, the woolly mammoths, the giant bison, and the reindeer. Hunting a mammoth wasn't just a feat of strength, it was a masterpiece of coordination. You couldn't kill a 4-ton beast alone. You needed a team. You needed language. You needed a plan that spanned days. This forced a shift in how humans lived together. In the lush tropics, you could survive in small, loose groups, but on the tundra, you needed a village. We see evidence of this in places like Metabolic in modern-day Ukraine. Archaeologists there discovered houses built entirely out of mammoth bones. One house alone used the mandibles of 95 different mammoths to create a circular foundation. They used the tusks to create arched doorways and roof supports, draped with heavy hides. These weren't temporary tents. They were sophisticated engineering projects that could house dozens of people, keeping them safe from winds that would have flattened a modern plywood home. Inside these bone huts, the human brain began to change. When you were trapped inside for weeks at a time by a blizzard, survival becomes a game of information. In 1964, archaeologists at a site called Sunghir near Moscow found a burial that changed how we view Ice Age culture. It was a man and 2 children, buried 30,000 years ago. They were covered in thousands of ivory beads, each one taking roughly an hour to carve. They wore bracelets, rings, and elaborate hats. This tells us something profound. These people weren't just getting by. They had enough of a surplus of food and heat that they could spend thousands of man-hours creating art. They were using jewelry to signal status, to tell stories, and to identify who belonged to which tribe. The cold forced us to become more social,
more symbolic, and more imaginative. We started to live in our heads as much as we lived in the world.
But perhaps the most extreme adaptation was what happened to our bodies and our minds. In the 1990s, researchers began looking at the metabolic cost of living in the Arctic. An Ice Age hunter needed to consume between 4,000 and 6,000 calories a day just to maintain their body weight. Most of that had to come from fat. Fat was the gold of the Ice Age. It wasn't just food, it was fuel for the brain. There's a theory that the high-fat diet required for Ice Age survival actually accelerated the development of the human brain, providing the dense energy needed to power our increasingly complex neural networks. We also learned to cooperate with other species. This was the era when the first wolves began to hang around human camps, drawn by the scraps of mammoth meat. Over generations, the bravest wolves and the most tolerant humans formed a pact. The dogs gave us their sense of smell and their ears to guard the camp at night, and we gave them warmth and food. It was a biological merger that made us the most formidable hunting force the planet had ever seen. The Ice Age ended about 11,000 years ago. The glaciers retreated, the mammoths went extinct, and the world warmed up. We moved into the era of agriculture and cities. We built the world of thermostats and light switches. But we are still, fundamentally, the people of the frost. Our craving for high-fat foods, our need for social belonging, our drive to create art and stories in the dark, these are all echoes of a time when the world tried to freeze us out, and we refused to go. We think of ourselves as masters of the earth because of our computers and our rockets. But the real victory happened 25,000 years ago in a bone hut by the light of a guttering fire with a bone needle and a piece of thread. We didn't just survive the cold, we let the cold forge us into who we are. Every time you zip up a coat or sit around a dinner table with your friends, you are practicing a ritual that was perfected on the edge of extinction. We are the descendants of the elite survivors, the ones who looked at a wall of ice and decided to stay. We traded the tundra for the living room, but the fire that kept us alive back then is still burning in the way we think, the way we dream, and the way we hold on to each other when the wind starts to howl.